The locksmith's drill whined against the brass lock, shavings of metal curling to the ground. Phones were already out, neighbors, curious strangers, even a few reporters. My grandson shouted from the walkway, "You can't do this! This is my listing!" I didn't answer. I just stood beside the locksmith, hands steady on my cane, watching him twist the cylinder free. The air smelled of dust and old paint. I'd waited months for this moment. Someone asked, "Sir, what's happening?" I said, calm as prayer, "He told me old people don't need houses. So today, I'm showing him what ownership really means." The crowd murmured. My grandson's face flushed red. He tried to grab the key, but the locksmith handed it straight to me. "New locks installed, Mr. Cole." I lifted the key high so everyone could see. "Mine again." He lunged toward me, and the cameras flashed. His voice cracked with panic. "You tricked me." I smiled, quiet and certain. "No, son. You tricked yourself." And that's where it began, right there on my porch, with a new key in my hand and his future unraveling in front of a live audience. Before we step back in time, if this story gives you courage, stay with me, and subscribe. The best part isn't the locks. It's how I learned to close the right doors and open the right ones. 2 months earlier, I thought my life was simple. After my stroke, I moved slower, but I still kept the garden trimmed, bills paid, and every hinge oiled. My daughter had passed years before, and her only son, Evan, was all the family I had left. He came every weekend at first, helping, laughing, pretending to care. Then one evening he said it, casual as weather, "Grandpa, old people don't need houses. They need safety." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But the next week, a "for sale" flyer with my address appeared online. Modern buyers only. The photo showed my living room, my paintings, my chair. When I asked him, he grinned. "Just testing interest. You'll thank me when we downsize." I stared at the screen, feeling the floor tilt beneath me. "Did you even ask?" "Grandpa, no one's going to buy it without your signature." That night I couldn't sleep. Something colder than anger settled inside me, a slow-burning decision. The next morning, I called an old friend from church, Clara, who was a realtor. "Clara," I said, "I need your help, but quiet help." She laughed softly. "Henry, I've seen that look before." "What did he do?" I told her everything. Clara came by with coffee and calm advice. "You can't confront him yet," she said. "He'll double down. Let's play smarter." We sat at my kitchen table, papers spread between us like maps to war. She explained how fake listings could be countered, with proof, dates, and ownership certificates. "But if you want to teach him a lesson," she said, "you'll need timing." "What kind of timing?" I asked. "The kind that embarrasses him on his own stage." We planned a mirror open house, 2 listings, same address, same day. One real, one his lie. I'd invite real buyers. She'd handle documents. All I had to do was act confused until the right moment. For weeks I played naive. Evan bragged about modern buyers and big commissions. I nodded, watering my plants, hiding my smile. Every step he took was a nail in his own trap. At night, I reviewed my papers, the deed, mortgage receipts, ID. Proof of everything. Revenge felt strange on me, like a new suit, uncomfortable but fitting. When the date finally appeared on his flyers, Sunday, noon to 4, I circled it in red. That would be the day the locks changed. The morning of the open house was crisp, sunlight bouncing off the porch railing. "I baked cookies, real estate tradition," Clara said. Evan arrived first, all confidence and cologne. "Don't worry, Grandpa, just stay out of sight. I nodded meekly. Of course, son. Wouldn't want to scare your modern buyers. He laughed, not noticing the second sign staked on the lawn beside his. His read for sale. Mine read private viewing by owner, by invitation only. By 11, cars lined the street. 2 sets of visitors approached at once. Evan's agents herded theirs to the left, Clara guided mine to the right. Cameras rolled from curious neighbors. Confusion bloomed. Is this a duplex? Someone asked. Evan froze. No, it's mine, my client's property. Clara lifted her clipboard. Actually, it's Mr. Henry Cole's property. Gasps. Phones raised. Evan's voice broke. You can't. Oh, I can, I said quietly, stepping beside her. Care to see proof? She handed over the folder, deed, ID, notarized signatures. The crowd murmured. Evan's confidence drained like color from paint. He turned to me, eyes wide. You set me up. I smiled. No, Evan. I just showed the truth where everyone could see it. When the police car pulled up, the crowd stepped back. Evan's shouts had drawn attention. An officer walked up calmly. Everything all right here, sir? Clara handed him copies of the documents. Verified ownership. He's been selling without consent. The officer studied Evan's fake flyers, then looked at me. Mr. Cole, do you want to press charges? I looked at my grandson, his face pale, hands trembling. Not yet, I said. He needs to learn before he pays. The officer nodded and left after confirming the paperwork. The crowd clapped softly as Evan stormed off the porch. Inside, Clara whispered, "That was brilliant." Not done yet, I said. I want him to see the locks changed. That afternoon, we called a locksmith. When the drill bit hit metal, that's when the cameras caught everything, the same footage that would go viral later. As the key clicked into place, Clara said quietly, "You've got your house back." I shook my head. No, I never lost it. I just reminded everyone whose name was on the door. After the chaos faded, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the new keys. My hands were steady, but my heart was racing. The quiet felt louder than the shouting. The internet had already begun to hum with the story, neighbors posting clips, strangers praising the grandpa who outsmarted greed. I didn't care about fame. I cared about lesson. Later that night, Clara called. "You're trending," she laughed. "You realize people are calling you the lock legend?" I chuckled. Better that than the fool who sold his house. She grew gentle. "He's your grandson, Henry. What will you do now?" "I'll let truth work." That's punishment enough. Still, part of me hurt. I'd raised him to respect work, not shortcuts. Somewhere along the line, he'd mistaken kindness for weakness. As I hung up, the doorbell rang, reporters. I waved them off through the glass. Let them talk. I needed rest. That night I whispered to myself, revenge feels loud. Justice whispers. Days later, the footage hit national news. Reporters called it the open house showdown. I avoided interviews, but the attention brought something good, letters. Hundreds of them. One from a widow in Phoenix read, "You gave me courage to stop my nephew from stealing my home." Another simply said, "Thank you for locking the truth." I read every one, humbled. Then came a letter from a lawyer offering to represent seniors facing property fraud. I passed it to Clara. "Let's make this bigger," I said. We organized workshops, free sessions teaching elders how to protect deeds and spot scams. People filled community centers to hear me talk. I told them, Age isn't weakness. It's warranty. Midway through one session, I caught myself smiling. This had started with anger, but it was becoming something else, purpose. After the clap that day, I said softly, "If this gave you courage, subscribe to our page. Stay informed. No hard sell. Just hope." Evan didn't show his face for weeks. Then one afternoon, I saw him standing across the street, staring at the new locks. He looked thinner, humbled. He walked up slowly. "Grandpa." I messed up. I nodded. "You did." He swallowed. "They kicked me out of business school. Said I broke ethics rules." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it. "I want to fix things." I studied his face, the same eyes that once glowed with arrogance now full of shame. "Start by working, not taking," I said. "Earn something that's truly yours." He nodded. "Maybe I could help with your workshops?" That caught me off guard. "If you're serious," I said, "be here Saturday. No pay. Just honesty." He showed up. Early. Carrying chairs, serving coffee, listening more than talking. Clara noticed. He might just learn after all. I hoped so. Because sometimes the best lock isn't on a door, it's on an old mistake finally sealed shut. The morning after the locksmith, my phone buzzed until I thought its battery would cry out. Messages. Emails. Video clips. People I'd never met were sending praise and small stories of their own fights. The house felt louder because everyone else had a voice now. Clara sat at my table with a stack of printed offers. "Foundations want to help," she said. "And producers want interviews." I shook my head. "I didn't do it for cameras." She smiled. "Some things use lights to grow." Later, a man from the city called. He said, "We'd like to honor you for protecting elders." I didn't know what to say except, "Thank you," which sounded small but true. I watched footage of the open house again, my grandson's face when the crowd pressed in, the locksmith handing me the new key. It all looked like a story from another life, yet the ache in my chest was real. I had raised him with hands that trembled over scraped knees and tools that never quit. I'd taught him patience. Somewhere along the way, he'd swapped kindness for taking. Rosalind visited that day with a thermos and a warm look. "You did the right thing," she said simply. Her words felt like a blanket. "What now?" I asked. She squeezed my shoulder. "Teach. Share what you learned." I thought about the widow who wrote me. I thought about the note from the lawyer who offered help. "Yes," I said. "We make sure no one else gets surprised at their own doorstep." That night I wrote a short plan on a napkin, classes, handouts, free legal help. It seemed too small for the roar outside my windows, but plans begin on napkins sometimes. I folded it and put it under the lamp. It felt like a small promise. A week later, I stood before a group of neighbors in the community hall. They sat in plastic chairs, some hunched, some angry, some watchful. Clara and I had set up a screen with slides titled, "Protecting Your Home, Simple Steps." I started with the basics, where your deed lives, how to spot forged listings, how banks should verify signatures. People scribbled notes like it was treasure. One man raised his hand and said, "I thought this stuff was too complicated." I told him, "It's not. You only need to learn the few steps that matter." At the back, Evan hovered, shoulders tight. He didn't speak, but he helped hand out booklets. That was his penance for a while, showing up and doing the small work that built trust. Watching him lift a chair for an old woman felt strange and right. After class, a volunteer lawyer from the city stayed late to answer questions. She offered to help seniors file complaints without cost. I felt a steady pride that had nothing to do with headlines. We were building a safety net from neighbors, not fame. Rosalind later said, "People come for the facts, Henry. They stay for how you say them." I thought about that. Maybe the lesson wasn't only to lock doors. It was to open rooms where people could learn to keep their own. That night, my living room felt warmer. Papers on the coffee table were no longer evidence, they were tools. I slid my new key into my pocket and slept with a calm that had work in it. The city had given me an idea, now I would make sure it stayed useful. The news kept rolling. Local reporters asked for interviews, national shows wanted bite-sized clips. I turned most of them down. I let Clara handle the press and the lawyers handle offers. My focus was on the neighbors who still lived in fear. One call came that stung more than the rest. Evan's business school had a letter on school letterhead, expelled. The dean's note said ethics violations and misconduct. He had to leave. I felt a hollow ache for him, then a firmer resolve that consequences should mean learning. Evan came the next day, eyes red. "They said I forged signatures," he said. "They said I lied. They took my scholarship." He looked like a man who had finally seen how slippery a small lie could be when it slid downhill. "You'll recover," I told him. "You'll have to earn it back." He nodded. "How?" he asked. I thought of the classes, the lawyer's offer, the neighbors who needed steady hands. "Come teach with me. Work with the charity. Start small." He swallowed. "I will." Teaching him to earn trust seemed harder than changing a lock, but maybe it did more good. The next morning he showed me a ledger of volunteer hours he wanted to log. Small steps. They were clumsy, honest, and they meant something. I kept watching. Redemption often moves slow, like the tides. Winter turned our little town quiet and bright, and I found more time to write. People sent me letters with questions and gratitude. I answered each one, sometimes with a single-type paragraph, other times with pages. Sharing felt like watering seeds. Clara and I turned the workshops into a proper program. We called it Coal Haven Outreach. The lawyer partnered with a clinic, and a local bank offered to run identity verification sessions. The city provided a tiny grant. I learned to accept help without shame. One afternoon, the mayor called and asked if I would accept a small award, Senior Defender of Rights. I balked. I pictured Evan's face and the months of hurt that had led here. But Clara nudged me. "You're doing work that matters." At the ceremony, my hands shook only a little as they placed the medallion around my neck. The crowd clapped warmly. My grandson, who had once yelled, "Modern buyers only," sat toward the back, head bowed. After the ceremony, he came up and hugged me. It felt like the first honest hug in a long while. That afternoon, a reporter asked, "Do you regret how public this got?" I thought of the widow who had dared to change a lock after watching. "No," I said. If the story helps one person keep their home, it was worth the spotlight. On the drive home, Rosalind squeezed my hand. "You're making a difference," she said. I nodded, thinking of the long way from a fake listing to a legal clinic. The path hadn't been easy, but it was right. Spring came with rain and the first green on the oak. The charity had a small fund now, donations from strangers who had seen the video and wanted to help. I sat at my desk and wrote a short plan, a scholarship for a student studying elder law and a few small grants for emergency legal fees. I called it the Coal Key Grant. The name felt odd, but it fit. When the university accepted our small scholarship, I felt a quiet pride. A young woman named Maya wrote back, thanking us for helping her studies. "I want to defend elders," she wrote. "Because of you. I thought of my own stubborn hands and felt a warmth. Evan worked with the fund, setting up meetings, learning to answer emails, to be gentle on the phone. He was awkward at first, then he grew steadier. One afternoon he brought a letter from a man who had lost a deed and feared eviction. Evan helped him navigate forms. The man's relief made Evan cry. I saw the change not in big speeches but in the small choices he made. We celebrated quietly one night with coffee and the first grant check signed. "You earned this," I told Evan. He looked at me, eyes wet, and whispered, "I'm sorry." I took his hand. "Then do better," I said. "Actions matter more than words." He nodded. The key in my pocket felt heavier that night, not with metal, but with purpose. Word of our work reached a national producer. They wanted to do a short piece for a show about community heroes. I debated it, but Rosalind said, "This will spread the message." So I agreed. They came with bright lights and soft questions. The camera hum made me nervous, but I spoke plainly: how to check deeds, how to talk to banks, and why neighbors must watch for one another. They asked for a moment that would stick for viewers. I told them a simple line: change the locks when you must, change the story when you can. That clip played on television that evening. The messages flowed in like rain. Someone from a senior center invited me to speak. A small church in another town sent a thank you plate. Suddenly our little program had ripple. Evan watched the clip with me that night. He turned and said, "If I had seen this sooner, I might not have done what I did." I didn't answer. What do you say to a regret that needs time to heal? Instead, I made him promise to be honest every day. He promised. He kept promising. Some good things spread fast. Some lessons take a long time. The house stayed warm, the work moved forward. I slept easier, knowing the locks were not the only defense. Summer brought a neighborhood fair. We set up a table for Coal Haven outreach with pamphlets, cookies, and a small sign: "Keep your home, keep your dignity." Volunteers handed out bookmarks and lists of local help. Children darted between tables, sticky with cotton candy. The day was loud and alive. A woman I'd met in a workshop approached and hugged me. "I filed a complaint," she said. "I kept my house." Her smile was bright and small. I felt the sort of joy that has no headline. Evan stood beside me, handing out lists and offering to help sign people up for free checks of their deeds. He moved with a steadier step now. Later, the mayor came by our table and pinned a small ribbon on my jacket: "Neighborhood Champion." I laughed and felt a happy tightness in my chest. At dusk we lit a small bonfire. People gathered round to share stories. The man from the legal aid office read a short letter from a judge who praised our program. The night felt like a community stitched stronger than before. When the fair wound down, Rosalind and I walked home under stars. "You turned a wound into a workshop," she said. I squeezed her hand. "And a boy into a man," I added, glancing back at Evan, who laughed with a volunteer. The house behind us looked safe, small lights in windows like kind eyes. A cool evening, and the oak threw long shadows across the yard. I found myself adding a new sign near the gate: "Open heart, closed deed." Clara helped paint the letters steady and bright. It felt good to make something that said both welcome and protection. We planned a small ceremony for neighbors, a simple gathering to mark the program's first anniversary. The mayor said he'd come. A reporter wanted a quick quote. I rehearsed nothing. I'd come to say thank you, not boast. The night of the ceremony, people filled my living room and spilled into the yard. Children ran with paper lanterns while neighbors traded dishes. The mayor read a short proclamation praising the work. He handed me a small plaque: "For service to older citizens." I held it like it was warm. Evan stood nearby and, later, read a letter he'd written aloud. He spoke about being young and foolish, about shortcuts and consequences. He apologized to the crowd and, most of all, to me. His voice shook. When he finished, people clapped, not for drama, but for the work of a man saying sorry out loud. After the ceremony, a neighbor came up and hugged me. "Your house is a good house," she said. I thought of the locks, the clinics, the letters, and the long nights of worry. I smiled. The key around my neck felt like a story told true. Autumn came again, soft and gold. My house smelled of cinnamon and sawdust. We were fixing the back fence together, Evan, Rosalind, and me. He worked without complaint, quiet but steady. I watched him drive each nail, the rhythm patient. Sometimes you rebuild people the same way you fix fences, one piece at a time. After lunch we sat on the porch. Evan wiped his hands on a rag. "Grandpa, why didn't you give up on me?" he asked. "Because someone once didn't give up on me," I said, remembering the nurses after my stroke. "We don't quit on family. We correct them." He looked out at the yard. "I used to think owning things made you powerful. Now I think keeping promises does." Rosalind smiled. "That's growth talking." We finished repairs before sunset. The wood gleamed new against the old posts, and I realized that's what healing looks like, old and new holding together. Inside, Clara called with news. The city wanted to feature Coal Haven outreach at the annual Civic Festival. "People love your slogan," she laughed. "Open heart, closed deed." I hung up feeling both proud and shy. Who would have guessed one bruise and one cruel remark could turn into this? When I locked the door that night, I paused, touching the key at my neck. It wasn't just metal, it was memory shaped into something that kept us safe. The festival day arrived bright and busy. Booths lined Main Street, music spilled from loudspeakers. Our table sat near the fountain, banners fluttering. I wore a simple white shirt with the program name stitched on the pocket. People streamed past, stopping to shake my hand or share stories. One woman said, "My brother almost lost his house, but your class saved him." Another brought cookies for the hero who taught us paperwork can be armor. I blushed so much Rosalind laughed. Mid-afternoon, the mayor stopped by with the local news crew. He asked me to speak for a minute on stage. My knees ached climbing the steps, but my voice came strong. "Security isn't about walls," I said. "It's about knowledge. When you learn your rights, nobody can list your home without your consent." The crowd clapped. Evan filmed from below, smiling wide. The camera flash caught the new key shining at my collar. After the speech, I joined Rosalind by the lemonade stand. "You sounded like a preacher," she teased. "I just told the truth," I said. As evening fell, fireworks bloomed above town. Their colors reflected in storefront windows like quick promises of light. I thought about that first awful day, the fake listing, the shouting, and how different this crowd's cheers were. Same porch, same man, but everything else changed. Winter wind returned, sharper this time. We spent more evenings inside, fire crackling. I took to writing notes for a small book Clara wanted me to publish, simple chapters teaching others to guard their homes. I titled it Keys to Keep. Each page was short, just lessons wrapped in stories, the importance of witnesses, honest conversations with family, and what one firm no can prevent. Evan helped format it on the computer. He was patient, careful now where he once rushed. One night he looked up from the screen. "You ever forgive me?" I set down my pen. Forgiveness isn't a door you unlock once. It's one you oil every day so it keeps working. He nodded slowly. "Then I'll keep it oiled." Rosalind laughed from the kitchen. "That line's going in the book." When the first printed copies arrived weeks later, I held one to my chest. The cover showed a hand holding a small brass key against a blue sky. Simple, honest, clear, like the life I was learning to live again. I mailed free copies to every community center that had written us. Inside the dedication I wrote, "For anyone who ever thought it was too late to stand up for themselves. It isn't." That night, I slept easy. The first snow surprised us. Tucson rarely saw it, thin white frosting on roofs and lawns. I made cocoa for everyone and opened the curtains so we could watch. Evan stared at the flakes like a child. "Never thought I'd see this here." "It's rare," I said. "Like second chances." We sat quietly for a while. Then my phone buzzed. It was a journalist from a national paper wanting an interview titled "The Man Who Changed His Locks and His Life." I sighed. "Do I have to?" Rosalind smiled. "Maybe someone far away needs the courage to change their locks, too." So we agreed. The reporter came 2 days later, young and curious. She asked about the betrayal, the video, the lessons. I kept answers simple: people can steal things, not values. When she left, Evan lingered at the doorway. "Grandpa, when they write about you, they all call it revenge. But it feels like something else." "It is," I said. "Revenge ends stories. Justice begins new ones." He nodded, understanding, slow but solid. Outside, the snow melted fast. The ground showed patches of green underneath, proof that warmth always returns. The article went live a week later. It painted me as both stubborn and kind. The headline read, "Wisdom Still Owns Property." I laughed at that. It sounded grander than truth, but readers loved it. Letters poured in again, this time from younger people. One wrote, "You made me realize my grandpa isn't helpless." Another said, "I'm learning to manage my own documents because of you." That one made me grin. The city invited me to give a talk at a local college. I hesitated, but Evan said, "You should. Students need to hear from someone who's lived consequences." So I stood before a hall of bright faces and told them our story, the arrogance, the fall, the rebuilding. No blame, just lessons. When I finished, silence hung, then applause like thunder. A student shouted, "You're a legend, Mr. Cole." I shook my head. Just a man who changed his locks. Afterward, the dean presented a small plaque to Cole Haven Outreach for community service. I carried it home, set it beside the first key the locksmith had handed me, and thought how both awards weighed the same, earned, not gifted. That night, I added a line to my book draft, "Knowledge is the only lock that never rusts." Evan kept working at the outreach center, no longer as my penance-bound grandson but as a real organizer. One day he approached me with a plan. "We could start a youth housing charity," he said. "Help kids aging out of foster care rent safely." It was his idea, not mine. That mattered. We called it Next Key Homes. Clara helped with paperwork, Rosalind designed a small logo, a bright key shaped like a heart. We hosted the first meeting in my living room. 5 volunteers showed up, some of them the same kids who had once laughed at my viral clip. They listened seriously now. Evan explained rental basics, while I talked about honesty. It felt like passing the torch instead of guarding it. Later, Rosalind whispered, "He's found his own redemption." I nodded. Watching him lead felt better than any award. The charity grew faster than expected. Donations trickled in, then streamed. When the first young tenant signed a safe lease, we threw a little party. Evan raised a cup of lemonade. "To second chances," he said. I raised mine. "And to locked doors that open into better rooms." Everyone laughed, and the house filled with something lighter than pride, peace. Months passed. The garden bloomed again, thick with marigolds. I spent mornings pruning while Rosalind read on the porch. Sometimes Evan dropped by just to mow the lawn and talk. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the governor's office inviting me to a state luncheon honoring citizens for civic courage. I almost declined, but Rosalind said, "You've earned one more spotlight." At the luncheon, speeches flowed, food grew cold. Then they called my name. For proving that age is strength, not limitation. The hall rose in applause. I felt heat behind my eyes. Afterward, reporters asked if I had one message for others. I said, "Security isn't age, it's knowledge." They liked that line. It ended up everywhere the next day. Back home, Evan hung the certificate above my desk. "Looks good here," he said. "So people remember what you taught them." "Not what I taught," I corrected. "What we learned together." Outside, the evening settled pink over the roofline. I realized the house no longer felt heavy with old pain. It breathed again, full of new stories. Thanksgiving returned, warm and crowded. We called it Housewarming 2.0. Neighbors filled every room. The smell of turkey mixed with laughter. Clara brought pie, the mayor brought flowers. Even the locksmith who'd changed my locks a year ago came by grinning. When everyone gathered around, I tapped my glass. "A year ago this house was a battlefield," I said. "Tonight it's a home again. Thank you for helping me rebuild it." Evan stood beside me, holding a framed photo of our first workshop. "Grandpa," he said, "thank you for not locking me out of your heart." The crowd clapped, some wiped tears. Rosalind kissed my cheek. Music started, and we danced slowly while fireworks from the park glowed in the windows. At the end of the night, I stepped onto the porch. The key around my neck caught the light, bright against the dark. I saw reflections of everything we'd survived. I whispered, "Too old for houses?" "Guess not." The laughter inside spilled out like warm air, and I joined them, closing the doors softly behind me, secure, loved, and home. The morning after our second Thanksgiving, sunlight filled the kitchen like gold. Dishes stacked high, the air still smelled of pie and coffee. Rosalind hummed while drying plates, and I just watched her move, feeling lucky. Evan sat at the table, sipping tea. "Grandpa," he said, "we should host a class for younger homeowners. Show them how to protect property before problems start." "Prevent instead of repair," I said. "Smart." We spent that afternoon drawing up plans, short videos, printed guides, simple checklists. Clara promised to handle editing. The idea was to make knowledge as easy to reach as gossip. When evening came, Evan stayed behind to lock up. I stood at the doorway, watching him check windows, test the bolt. A year ago, he'd been the one I locked out. Now he guarded the house like it was his duty. Before he left, he looked back. "You trust me again?" "I do," I said. "Because you earned it." After he drove off, I went to the garden. The marigolds had wilted with winter, but their dry scent still hung in the air. I knelt, tracing the soil. Some things bloom, die, and bloom again, just like people who finally learn. I whispered, "Thank you for this piece," not to anyone in particular, just into the quiet night. By January, Coal Haven outreach had expanded. We rented a small office downtown, a single room above a bakery, smelling always of sugar. The walls filled with letters from families we'd helped. I hung the locksmith's old receipt framed by the door. A reminder of beginnings. Rosalind handled finances. Evan ran workshops. I focused on counseling individuals. People came with thick folders and thin patience. I taught them patience and courage in equal measure. One morning, a man arrived, shoulders slumped. My son says I should sell my house, he muttered. I asked, do you want to sell it? No, then don't. Start with that word. No. He smiled weakly. Feels good to say it. By the time he left, his back was straighter. I sat for a moment afterward, realizing teaching others to guard their homes helped me guard my own spirit. Evan stopped by with coffee. Guess what? He said. A newspaper wants to feature our office in a series about small heroes. I chuckled. Small heroes are the best kind. They fit through locked doors. That night, Rosalind and I closed the office together. She slipped her hand into mine as we stepped out into the cool air. You built something that will outlive you, she said. Not built, I said softly. Rebuilt. February came with letters stacked high. One stood out, a handwritten note from Gertrude, Evan's mother, and my late daughter's sister-in-law. We hadn't spoken in years. The letter trembled slightly in my hands as I read. Henry, I saw the video. I'm proud of what you did, but I wish your daughter were here to see it. Evans turned out better than I expected. Thank you for not giving up on him. It was short but heavy with things unsaid. I read it twice before setting it beside the lamp. Evan stopped by later that evening. I handed him the letter. He read it quietly. She never wrote like this before, he said. Maybe she's changing too. Maybe honesty spreads faster than greed, I said. We sat without talking for a while, just listening to the rain tap on the windows. Sometimes silence is the best apology. After he left, Rosalind found me still at the table. You okay? She asked. I'm more than okay, I said. I'm grateful. I looked at the house, my house, lit softly by the porch light. For the first time, it didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like a bridge between what hurt and what healed. March brought an unexpected call. The city council wanted to name a day after Cole Haven Outreach. Henry Cole Day, the clerk said. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the phone. But they meant it. That month, the town square filled with people wearing tiny paper keys pinned to their shirts. There was music, speeches, food trucks, laughter. The mayor presented a plaque. Evan gave a short talk about youth and responsibility. Rosalind stood beside me, smiling with pride. When it was my turn to speak, I said, don't build walls to keep people out. Build locks to keep lessons in. The crowd clapped, the words simple but true. After the ceremony, a young reporter asked if I ever feared losing my house again. I said, no. Because now, even if the walls fell, I'd still have what matters, knowledge and community. That evening, fireworks burst over the square again, just like that first night after the locksmith. Only this time, no anger burned beneath the light, only peace. April was quiet. The flowers returned to the garden, and I spent afternoons reading under the oak. Sometimes Rosalind joined me, sketching. Sometimes Evan came by with youth volunteers, and we'd all eat sandwiches together. One afternoon, Evan brought a newspaper clipping. Grandpa, look, they quoted you again. The headline read, Security isn't age, it's knowledge, says Henry Cole. I laughed. Guess I'm turning into a proverb. Rosalind smiled. Not a proverb, an example. We sat in the fading light, and I realized life had turned full circle. The porch where betrayal began now echoed with calm voices and laughter. The same boards, the same walls, but everything inside them had changed. As the sun set, Evan asked, do you think Mom would be proud of me? Yes, I said without hesitation. Because I am, and I taught her to be. The wind carried petals across the yard. I thought how small things, trust, effort, forgiveness, drift like that, landing quietly where they're needed most. May arrived with bright mornings. I received a call from a publisher. They wanted to print keys to keep nationwide. I almost said no, but Rosalind said, "This is how stories live after us." So I agreed. At the signing event, people lined up with books. A woman whispered, "You changed how my family talks about money." Another said, "I bought locks after watching your story." I smiled each time, humbled. Evan sat beside me signing copies too, his section about youth responsibility. On one page he wrote, "A locked door is just a beginning." The local paper took a photo of us at the table, our hands overlapping on the cover. It ran under the caption, "Generations Repaired." Later, at home, Rosalind opened champagne. To the man who turned pain into print, she said. I laughed and raised my glass. To the woman who kept me editing. When the night ended, I stood by the window. The city lights blinked softly, steady and sure. The lock on my front door clicked into place, gentle and final, a sound that now meant safety. Summer crept in warm and slow. The charity had grown enough to hire staff, which meant I could finally rest more. Evan insisted I take a trip. "You've been working non-stop for 2 years," he said. So Rosalind and I packed a small car and drove west to California. We traced the coast, stopping at lighthouses and seaside cafes. Each morning I woke to the sound of waves instead of phone calls. At a beachside market, a vendor recognized me. "You're that lock guy," he laughed. "You taught my dad not to sign without reading." We talked a while. He gave me a seashell as a souvenir. Rosalind said, "You see? Even the tide remembers you." We laughed. That night, we watched the sunset together. I said, "You know what I learned from all this?" She tilted her head. "What?" "That revenge is small. Redemption is the big house we build after." The sea whispered below us. Somewhere behind the waves, my old life washed away quietly. When we came home, the town looked different, new shops, new faces. But my house stood steady, same oak tree, same porch. I touched the key around my neck and smiled. Evan was waiting with news. "The state is giving us a bigger grant," he said. "We can help more seniors now." "That's wonderful," I said. "Promise you'll lead it with care." "I will." We celebrated with pizza at the office. Clara raised a toast. "To Henry, who proved wisdom still owns property." Everyone laughed and cheered. Afterward, I went out for air. The street was quiet, warm. I looked up at the windows glowing softly, proof that my home had outlasted everything thrown at it. I whispered, "Too old for houses?" "Guess not." Inside, Rosalind was dancing to soft radio music. I joined her. The lock clicked behind us, secure, gentle, final. Outside, the city hummed, unaware of the quiet joy within one small house that refused to be taken. A few months later, I woke to a letter from a national foundation. They wanted to feature Coal Haven Outreach as a model program for elder rights. They even offered a grant for expansion into neighboring towns. I read it twice before the meaning sank in. I walked to the garden where Rosalind was trimming roses. "Looks like our little idea grew legs," I said. She laughed. "More like wings." Evan came that evening with coffee. "You did this," he said. "You started it all." "We did it," I corrected. "Every one of us who refused to give up." He nodded, then pulled out an envelope. Inside was a simple card with 2 words, "Thank you." "It's from the first student we housed," he explained. "She graduated college last week." I held the card like treasure. "That's the best reward of all," I said. Later that night, I walked through the quiet rooms of my house. I paused by the front door, hand resting on the lock. I remembered the day it changed, the crowd, the cameras, the noise. This silence felt better. I whispered, "We did all right, House." And I swear, the boards creaked back softly, as if agreeing. Fall brought another festival. We'd hosted them every year since that first one, but this time it felt like a homecoming. Banners hung from lamp posts. Kids ran around wearing cardboard keys. The mayor opened with a short speech. Henry Cole reminded us that wisdom doesn't retire, he said. The crowd cheered, and I found myself smiling shyly. Evan led the youth booth now, teaching teenagers about contracts and savings. Seeing him laugh with them filled me with something quiet and proud. Rosalind set up our display table with photos, before and after shots of my house, the first class, the locksmith smiling beside me. "You know," she said, "this could have ended badly." "But it didn't," I said. "Because we turned pain into purpose." As dusk settled, a local band played soft jazz. People danced. Someone handed me a paper lantern. I lit it, watching it float upward into the cool night sky. For a long moment, it hovered, glowing like a tiny sun. "Look," Rosalind said. "It's finding its way." "So did we," I whispered. One morning, I found Evan sitting on the porch steps, holding an envelope. "Grandpa, I got accepted to university again," he said. "Different school, new start." My chest tightened. "That's wonderful, son." He smiled. "I'll study social work. Help others the way you helped me." I nodded, fighting the lump in my throat. "That's a better inheritance than money." He spent the next few weeks preparing. We boxed up supplies for his dorm, shared long dinners, and laughed at old photos. The night before he left, he stood by the door and hugged me hard. "I wouldn't be here if you hadn't believed I could change." "Just keep doing the right thing," I said. "That's how you keep your own lock safe." When his car disappeared down the road the next morning, the house felt bigger, quieter. Rosalind found me at the window. "You okay?" "Proud," I said. "Just proud." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything we'd fixed. With Evan gone to college, I poured my time into gardening and writing. Keys to Keep had become a staple in community libraries. Letters still arrived, filled with stories from readers who'd faced down greed and won. One letter stood out. A man from Florida wrote, "Your story stopped my nephew from selling my land. I owe you my peace." I folded it carefully, slid it into the book as a keepsake. Rosalind and I began planning our next trip, northern towns this time. We wanted to visit communities that had started similar programs. She teased, "You are becoming a traveling key salesman." "Better than a locksmith of regret," I said, and she laughed until tears formed. We left that weekend, a small car full of pamphlets and snacks. At each stop, people shared gratitude. It struck me how far a single act of standing up had traveled. By the time we returned, the house looked even more like home, a place of rest, not defense. I realized then that true security isn't what keeps people out, it's what keeps hope inside. The following spring, a film crew arrived to make a short documentary. They called it The Man Who Locked in Justice. The title made me laugh, but they meant well. They filmed me walking through the garden, touching the oak tree, and standing at the same front door where everything began. "How does it feel, Mr. Cole?" the interviewer asked. "Peaceful," I said. "I used to think victory was loud. Turns out, it's quiet." They captured clips of Rosalind arranging flowers, of Evan calling from campus, of volunteers in the office. When the documentary aired, people sent even more letters. Some called it inspiring, others said it made them cry. But my favorite message came from Evan, "You're my hero, Grandpa." But more than that, you are my teacher. I read it twice, then tucked it into my wallet. That evening, I sat with Rosalind on the porch as the sun went down. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Think they'll remember us?" she asked. I smiled. "They'll remember what we stood for." Another year turned. The outreach office thrived without me now. Evan handled budgets, workshops, even board meetings. Watching him lead made me proud in the way only quiet things can. He visited one weekend, wearing a new suit. "We are partnering with the state," he said. "They want to build senior housing in your name, the Henry Cole residences." I blinked. "That's too much." "It's right," he said. "You started all this." Rosalind squeezed my hand. "Guess you're not just a proverb now." At the dedication ceremony months later, the sign unveiled in sunlight, "The Henry Cole Residences, open heart, closed deed." The crowd cheered. I stood before the new building, overwhelmed. In that moment, I saw everything at once: the betrayal, the locks, the letters, the laughter. Pain had built something lasting. Later that night, Evan handed me the ceremonial golden key. "It's symbolic," he said. I laughed. "Good. I've had enough locks to last a lifetime." The seasons cycled softly. My days slowed, but my heart stayed busy. Rosalind and I hosted dinners for new volunteers. Sometimes Evan joined through video call, his office behind him lined with framed photos from our journey. I spent mornings writing letters, answering those who still reached out for advice. My favorite line to repeat was, "Security isn't age, it's knowledge." That phrase had become our motto, painted on the outreach wall. One night, I walked through the quiet house alone, touching the frames on the wall, the locksmith, the crowd, the first award, the newspaper headline. Each photo was a door I'd closed properly. When I returned to the living room, Rosalind was setting the table. "Dinner's ready," she said. I smiled. "Coming." I paused at the front door, turning the key one last time. The sound echoed like a heartbeat, steady, certain, alive. The next Thanksgiving came bright and full. Friends, neighbors, even some of the first families we'd helped filled the rooms. Evan was home, taller in confidence, quieter in pride. After dinner, he clinked his glass. "To my grandfather," he said. "The man who taught me what a real home is." The room applauded. I stood, heart full. To everyone who ever thought they were too old, too small, or too late, remember this. Security isn't age, it's knowledge. The crowd cheered. Outside, fireworks bloomed again, their colors reflecting on the windows, painting the house in light. Rosalind pulled me to dance. The laughter rose like music. I felt the weight of the key around my neck, warm, reassuring, and light as air. I whispered to her, "He said old people don't need houses." She smiled. Guess he was wrong. We danced until the fireworks faded, a shadow swaying across the walls of a home that had never belonged to anyone else. And as the final spark lit the sky, I thought, security isn't walls or locks, it's knowing you've kept your story safe. Please subscribe and tell me how you feel about this justice in the comments. I'll be reading all. Thanks.